Sometimes the most important lessons we teach our children happen in the most unexpected moments. For Terence, a 48-year-old single father, that moment came on an ordinary Tuesday evening at a busy diner. He's there with his 8-year-old daughter Sophie, trying to give her a nice meal after another long week. But when a well-dressed man starts harassing their waitress, treating her like she's nothing, Terence faces a choice. He could stay quiet and mind his business like everyone else, or he could show his daughter what it really means to stand up for people who need help. What Terence doesn't know is that the waitress he's about to defend is hiding a secret that will change everything. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Crossroads Diner sat on the corner of 5th and Manning, a fixture in the neighborhood for 30 years. Its neon sign flickered in the early evening light, casting a warm glow across the cracked sidewalk where Terence held his daughter's hand. The air smelled of grilled onions and fresh coffee, familiar scents that meant comfort and routine. "Daddy, can I get the pancakes?" Sophie looked up at him with those wide brown eyes that still held all the innocence he worked so hard to protect. "It's dinner time, sweetheart." Terence smiled, smoothing down her dark curls. "How about we compromise? You can have the French toast." She considered this with the seriousness of a judge deliberating a major case. "With extra syrup?" "With extra syrup." They pushed through the glass door, and the familiar chaos of the dinner rush embraced them. The diner was nearly full, every booth and table occupied by the working families of their neighborhood. Terence recognized most of the faces: the Kowalski family from down the street, old Mr. Brenner reading his newspaper at the counter, the Rodriguez boys arguing good-naturedly over a shared plate of fries. This was their Tuesday tradition, started 3 years ago when Sophie asked why they never went out to eat like other families. Terence's paycheck from Patterson Manufacturing didn't leave much room for extras, but he'd made this work. Every Tuesday, without fail, they came to the Crossroads. It was their time, just the two of them, away from homework and housework and the endless responsibilities of single parenthood. "Booth or counter?" Terence asked, though he already knew the answer. "Booth! The one by the window, so I can see the birds." They settled into their usual spot, the vinyl seats patched with duct tape but clean. Sophie immediately grabbed the crayons and paper placemat, beginning her ritual of drawing their dinner adventure. Terence watched her for a moment, his heart squeezing with the familiar mix of love and worry that defined his existence. She was 8 now, getting older every day, and he wondered constantly if he was doing right by her. 5 years. 5 years since the accident that took Caroline. 5 years of navigating parenthood alone, of being both mother and father, of second-guessing every decision. Some days the weight of it threatened to crush him, but then Sophie would laugh at something silly or crawl into his lap for a hug, and he'd remember why he got up every morning at 5:30 to make it all work. Evening. "Folks!" The waitress appeared with menus and a warm smile. Terence recognized her. Lenora, she'd been working here about 6 months now. She was different from the other servers, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, with a natural grace that seemed at odds with the hurried chaos of the diner. Or the way she spoke, her words carefully chosen and articulated, with a refinement that suggested education beyond what most folks in this neighborhood could afford. "Hi, Lenora," Sophie chirped, already warming to her. "I'm getting French toast for dinner because Daddy said I could compromise." Lenora laughed, a genuine sound that reached her eyes. "Well, that sounds like a very grown-up decision. And what about you, sir?" "Meatloaf special, please. And a coffee." Terence handed back the menus. "Thank you." "My pleasure. I'll get that right in for you." As she walked away, Terence noticed her pause at another table, handling a difficult customer with patience and professionalism. The man was snapping his fingers at her, demanding immediate service, even though she clearly had other tables. She simply smiled, promised to be right with him, and continued to the kitchen with their order. "Daddy, why do some people act mean to waiters?" Sophie had stopped drawing, her crayon hovering over the paper. The question caught him off guard, though it shouldn't have. Sophie noticed everything, her young mind constantly processing the world around her with an earnestness that both delighted and worried him. How did you explain human cruelty to a child? How did you teach her about the world's unfairness without stealing her innocence? Well, honey, sometimes people forget that everyone deserves respect, no matter what job they do. He chose his words carefully. Being a waitress is hard work. She's on her feet all day, dealing with lots of different people, trying to make everyone happy. That deserves kindness, not meanness. Sophie nodded slowly, processing this. Mama would have said to treat people how you want to be treated. The mention of Caroline hit him like it always did, unexpected and sharp, even after 5 years. Yes, she would have. That's exactly what she would have said. I remember that about her. Sophie went back to her drawing, adding what looked like a bird to her scene. Not a lot, but I remember she was always nice to people. Terence swallowed hard. Sophie had been only 3 when Caroline died. Her memories were fading, becoming more impression than detail, and he fought constantly to keep his wife's presence alive for their daughter. Photo albums, stories, little reminders of the woman who had been his partner, his best friend, his anchor. The diner buzzed with activity around them. A baby cried 2 booths over. Someone dropped a plate in the kitchen. The crash followed by good-natured laughter. The jukebox in the corner played an old country song, barely audible over the conversations and clinking silverware. This was life, messy and loud and real. These were his people, working folks who understood the value of $1 and the importance of showing up. Day after day, even when it was hard, Lenora returned with his coffee and Sophie's orange juice, setting them down with practiced ease. Food will be right up. Can I get you anything else? We're good, thank you. Daddy's a supervisor at the factory, Sophie announced proudly. He makes sure everything runs right. Lenora smiled at her. That sounds like an important job. It is, Sophie confirmed with absolute certainty. He works really hard. Terence felt his face warm with embarrassment. Sophie, what? You do? His daughter looked genuinely confused about why this would embarrass him. Lenora's expression softened with something like understanding. I can tell. You're raising a wonderful daughter. That's the hardest and most important work there is. She moved on to the next table before he could respond, but her words settled over him like a blanket. When was the last time someone had acknowledged what he was trying to do? Most days, he felt like he was barely keeping his head above water, bills piling up, Sophie's needs growing more complex, the exhaustion of being everything to everyone. His employee badge from Patterson Manufacturing hung from his belt loop, faded and worn from 15 years of faithful service. He'd started on the factory floor right out of community college, worked his way up through sheer determination and reliability. Supervisor now, managing a crew of 23 men and women who trusted him to be fair and to fight for them when corporate made unreasonable demands. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was honest, and it provided for Sophie. The diner continued its evening rhythm around them. Conversations rose and fell, punctuated by laughter and the occasional raised voice of someone making a point. Terence recognized the feeling of belonging here, among people who understood what it meant to work hard for modest rewards. Nobody here was putting on airs or pretending to be something they weren't. They were teachers and mechanics, nurses and construction workers, single parents and retired couples living on fixed incomes. They were real. Lenora appeared again, this time balancing 3 plates with effortless skill. She set down Sophie's French toast, golden brown and drowning in syrup just as requested, and his meatloaf special with mashed potatoes and green beans. "Enjoy your meal," Lenora said, already turning to handle the next request from a table across the room. Terence cut Sophie's French toast into manageable pieces while she carefully arranged her napkin in her lap. Another thing Caroline had taught her. A small grace that survived in their daughter's habits. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. The kind of quiet that only comes between people who are truly at ease with each other. "This is really good," Sophie declared. Syrup on her chin. "I'm glad, sweetheart." He handed her a napkin. "How was school today?" And just like that, they were off. Sophie launching into an elaborate story about her art class and something her friend Brittany had said at lunch and how she'd gotten a star on her spelling test. Terence listened with the full attention he tried to give her every day, knowing these conversations were building the foundation of trust and communication they'd need as she grew older. He didn't know that everything was about to change. That in just a few minutes, a choice would present itself that would alter the course of their lives. That the simple act of standing up for what was right would set in motion events that would test everything he believed about himself. About justice, about the gulf between different worlds. For now, there was just the warmth of the diner, his daughter's happy chatter, and the simple pleasure of a meal shared with the person he loved most in the world. The door chimed and a man walked in who didn't belong. Terence noticed him immediately. Everyone did. He wore a suit that probably cost more than Terence made in a month, charcoal grey with subtle pinstripes, tailored perfectly to his frame. His shoes gleamed with the kind of polish that came from professional care, not a quick wipe with a rag. Everything about him screamed money and entitlement. From his expensive watch to the way he surveyed the diner with barely concealed contempt. Preston Caldwell was in his early 50s, with silver temples and the kind of tan that came from golf courses and resort vacations. He didn't wait to be seated, simply chose a table in the center of the room and sat down heavily, pulling out his phone and ignoring everyone around him. The diner's comfortable buzz faltered slightly. People glanced at him, then away, sensing the disruption he brought with him. Terence went back to his meal, but something uneasy had settled in his chest. Lenora approached Preston's table with her usual professional smile. "Good evening, sir. Can I get you started with something to drink?" "It's about time." Preston didn't look up from his phone. "I've been sitting here for minutes. I apologize for the wait, sir. We're a bit busy tonight." Her voice remained pleasant, but Terence saw her shoulders tense slightly. "What can I get you?" "What can you get me?" Preston finally looked up, his eyes cold. "How about competent service?" "Is that too much to ask in a place like this?" A few diners shifted uncomfortably. Lenora's smile never wavered. "I'd be happy to take your order whenever you're ready. Scotch, neat, and make sure it's top shelf. Not whatever swill you people usually serve." "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't serve alcohol here." "We have coffee, tea, soft drinks. You don't serve alcohol?" Preston's voice rose with incredulity. "What kind of restaurant doesn't serve alcohol?" "It's a diner, sir. But I can get you a nice coffee, or—" "I don't want coffee." He waved his hand dismissively. "Fine, water, room temperature, not cold." "And I'll have the steak, medium rare." Lenora pulled out her order pad. "I'm afraid we don't have steak on the menu tonight. We have meatloaf, pot roast, or the chicken special." "Are you serious?" Preston looked around the diner as if seeking witnesses to this outrage. "No steak." "What kind of establishment is this?" "It's a neighborhood diner, sir." Lenora's voice remained calm, but Terence could hear the strain beneath it. "We have good, honest food. I can recommend—" "I don't need recommendations from you, sweetheart." The condescension in his voice made several people glance over. "Just bring me whatever you have that's halfway edible. And hurry up about it." Lenora wrote something on her pad, her hand moving with deliberate control. "I'll get that in for you right away." As she turned to leave, Preston called after her. "And don't forget the water. Room temperature. Think you can handle that?" She nodded without turning back, heading toward the kitchen with measured steps. Terence watched her go, his jaw tightening. Sophie had stopped eating, her fork halfway to her mouth. "Daddy," she whispered. "That man is being really mean. I know, honey. Just eat your dinner." But Terence couldn't look away. Preston was on his phone now, talking loudly about some business deal, clearly wanting everyone to hear how important he was. When Lenora returned with his water, setting it down carefully, Preston didn't even acknowledge her. "Your food will be up shortly," she said. Preston held up one finger. "Wait," while he finished his phone conversation. Lenora stood there waiting, while he made her stand like a servant. Finally, he ended the call. "This water is cold," he said, not even looking at it. "I'm sorry, sir. You asked for room temperature." "I can get you—" "I know what I asked for." Preston pushed the glass toward her. and in what might have been an accident but felt deliberate, the glass tipped over, spilling water across the table and onto his expensive suit. He jumped up, his face reddening. "Are you kidding me?" "Look what you did." "Sir, I'm so sorry. Let me get you some napkins." "Some napkins? Do you know how much this suit costs?" He was nearly shouting now. "Probably more than you make in a year, and you just ruined it." Lenora grabbed napkins from a nearby station, trying to help clean up. "Please, sir, I'll get you towels. We can—" "Don't touch me." Preston swatted her hand away. "God, the incompetence! I should have known better than to stop in a place like this." The entire diner had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now, frozen in their seats. The manager, a thin man named Bert, who'd run the Crossroads for a decade, emerged from the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. "Is there a problem here?" Bert asked nervously. "Yes, there's a problem." Preston gestured at Lenora. "This waitress dumped water all over me. I want her fired. Now." "Sir, I really don't think—" Bert began. "I don't care what you think." Preston pulled out his wallet, removing a business card. "Do you know who I am?" "Preston Caldwell. Caldwell Investment Group. I have connections all over this city. One phone call and I can make things very difficult for this little establishment." Lenora had stepped back, her face pale. "Mr. Bert, I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Of course you didn't mean to," Bert said quickly. "Sir, let us comp your meal, and I don't want a free meal." Preston was enjoying this now, Terence realized. Enjoying the power, the fear, the attention. "I want an apology. A real one." "On your knees." The words hung in the air like poison. Lenora stood very still. "Sir, I've apologized. I'm truly sorry about your suit." "On your knees." Preston's smile was cruel. "Unless you don't value your job?" Terence felt Sophie's hand grip his arm. "Daddy," she said, her voice small and scared.
"Shouldn't someone help her?"
And just like that, the choice was in front of him. He could stay quiet, mind his own business, keep Sophie safe from conflict. That would be the smart thing, the cautious thing. Or he could do what Caroline would have done. What he'd been teaching Sophie to do all her life. Stand up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. He set down his fork. "Sophie, stay here." "Daddy, stay here, sweetheart. I'll be right back." Terence stood, his legs steadier than he felt inside. The walk across the diner seemed to take forever, and no time at all. Preston didn't notice him approaching, too focused on Lenora's humiliation. "That's enough." Terence's voice was calm, but firm. "You need to treat her with respect." Preston turned, surprised to be interrupted. He looked Terence up and down. The worn jeans, the factory work shirt, the hands calloused from honest labor. His expression shifted from surprise to dismissive amusement. "I'm sorry," Preston said, his tone making it clear he wasn't sorry at all. "Are you talking to me?" "Yes, I am." Terence didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "Apologize to her, for real. Then leave." The diner was absolutely silent now. Every eye in the place was on them. Preston laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "Mind your own business, pal. Go back to your table." "This is my business," Terence said quietly. "You're being cruel to someone who doesn't deserve it. That makes it everyone's business?" "Everyone's business?" Preston stepped closer, trying to use his height advantage. "Who do you think you are? Some kind of hero? Look at you. You probably can't even afford to eat here without counting pennies. And you're going to tell me how to behave? I'm telling you to be decent. It's not complicated." Preston's face flushed with anger now, the amusement gone. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I could buy this entire building with pocket change. I could buy you. So I suggest you turn around and walk away before you regret it." Terence didn't move. Behind Preston, he could see Lenora, her eyes wide, shaking her head slightly as if to say it wasn't worth it. But it was worth it. It had to be, because Sophie was watching. "I'm not asking you to leave because of who you are or what you can buy," Terence said evenly. "I'm asking because of how you're treating another human being. There's a difference." Preston's eyes narrowed. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he considered beneath him. "You're making a mistake. A big one. The only mistake here is yours." Terence held his ground. "Apologize to her." or I'll make sure everyone in this diner knows exactly what kind of man you are. They already know what kind of man I am. Successful, powerful. Preston pulled a business card from his wallet, flicking it at Terence. It fluttered to the floor between them. That's who I am. And you're nobody. But you'll remember this conversation when my lawyers contact you. A murmur ran through the diner. Several people shifted uncomfortably, but an elderly woman at a corner booth spoke up. He's right, you know. You're acting shamefully, and you should leave, her husband added, his voice carrying the authority of age and experience. Preston looked around, realizing he'd lost the room. His face twisted with anger and something else, embarrassment maybe, or wounded pride. Fine, this place is beneath me anyway. He pointed at Lenora. You're lucky I don't have time to deal with incompetent help. Then he turned to Terence, his voice dropping to a cold whisper that only the two of them could hear. You just made an enemy you can't afford. I'll destroy you for this. Your job, your home, everything. You'll wish you'd stayed in your seat. He stormed toward the door, shoving it open so hard it banged against the wall. The diner watched him go, then slowly, people began to clap. It started with the elderly couple and spread through the room, quiet at first, then building. Terence felt his face flush. He didn't want applause. He just wanted to get back to his daughter. But people were standing now, coming over to shake his hand, pat his shoulder. But the manager was thanking him profusely, promising their meal was on the house, and Lenora was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude, yes, but also concern. Deep concern. She approached him as the crowd began to settle. Thank you, she said softly. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Terence glanced back at Sophie, who was beaming at him from their booth. My daughter was watching. Still, men like him, she paused, choosing her words carefully. They don't forget. They don't forgive. I'm not worried about him. You should be. Lenora pulled a pen from her apron, wrote something on her order pad and tore off the page. This is my number. If anything happens, anything at all, please call me. I owe you. Terence took the paper, folding it without looking at it. You don't owe me anything. I just did what was right. That's exactly why I owe you. She glanced toward the kitchen. I should get back to work, but please keep that number. And be careful. As she walked away, Terence returned to his booth. Sophie threw her arms around him before he could sit down. Daddy, you were so brave. Just like a superhero. He hugged her back, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. Not a superhero, sweetheart. Just someone who saw something wrong and tried to make it right. That's what superheroes do, she insisted. Maybe, but superheroes didn't have to worry about bills and jobs and taking care of 8-year-old daughters. Superheroes didn't lie awake at night wondering if they'd made the right choice. If standing up had been worth the potential consequences, they finished their meal, which Bert insisted on comping despite Terence's protests, and drove home through streets growing dark. Sophie chatted the whole way, replaying the confrontation with the excitement of youth, not understanding the undercurrent of threat that had run through Preston's final words. Their apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better days. The elevator worked half the time, the hallway carpet was worn thin, but it was clean and safe and theirs. Terence had made it into a home for Sophie, filling it with her drawings, her books, the stuffed animals she'd had since she was a baby. The evening routine unfolded, as it always did. Homework check, bath time, bedtime story. Sophie chose the same book she'd been choosing for a week, about a brave knight who helped people. Terence read it without complaint, doing all the voices the way she liked. Daddy, she said sleepily as he tucked her in. Are you going to be okay? That man seemed really mad. I'm going to be fine. He kissed her forehead. Don't you worry about anything. That's my job. I'm proud of you. The words hit him square in the chest. I'm proud of you too, sweetheart. Every single day. She fell asleep quickly, the way children do, unburdened by the weight of adult concerns. Terence sat in their small living room, the television on but unwatched, and pulled out the paper Lenora had given him. Her number was written in neat, elegant handwriting, the kind that came from expensive private schools, not public education. Who was she really? A waitress at a neighborhood diner who drove past in an old sedan, who worked hard for tips, his phone rang, making him jump. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Hello, Mr. Terence Walker. A woman's voice, professional and cool. Yes, who's this? I'm calling from Peterson Manufacturing. I need to inform you that your employment has been terminated, effective immediately. The words didn't make sense. What, there must be some mistake. I've worked there for 15 years. I'm a supervisor. The decision came from corporate restructuring. Your final check will be mailed to your address on file. But Terence's mind raced. Can I at least talk to Mr. Henderson? There has to be... I'm sorry. The decision is final. Good evening, Mr. Walker. The line went dead. Terence sat there, phone in hand, trying to process what had just happened. Fired. Just like that. No warning, no explanation beyond corporate restructuring. 15 years of loyalty, of perfect attendance, of going above and beyond. Preston's face flashed in his mind. His final words. I'll destroy you. No, that was impossible. It had only been a few hours. Even someone with connections couldn't work that fast. It had to be coincidence. Bad timing. The economy was tough. Manufacturing jobs were. But even as he tried to convince himself, doubt crept in. Preston had said he had connections all over the city, had meant it as a threat. And now, hours later, Terence had lost his job. He looked at the bills stacked on the kitchen counter. Rent due in 2 weeks. Utilities. Sophie's school expenses. Groceries. He had maybe 2 months of savings if he was careful. 3, if he was desperate. His hand trembled as he picked up Lenora's number again. It was late. He shouldn't call. But he needed, what, advice? Confirmation that this wasn't his fault? Someone to tell him it would be okay. Before he could talk himself out of it, he dialed. She answered on the second ring. Hello? Lenora? It's Terence. From the diner. Terence. Her voice shifted immediately, concern flooding through. What's wrong? His voice cracked. I just got fired. From my job. The one I've had for 15 years. Silence on the other end. Then quietly, oh no, I was afraid of this. You knew? How could you know? Because I know Preston Caldwell. I know what he's capable of, she sighed. Can we meet tomorrow? There are things I need to tell you. Things you should know. What things? Not over the phone. Tomorrow, please. Terence looked around his small apartment at the life he'd built for his daughter and felt it all slipping through his fingers like sand. Okay, tomorrow. After they hung up, he sat in the darkness for a long time, listening to the buildings settle around him, the distant sounds of neighbors living their lives. Everything had changed in a single evening. One choice, one moment of standing up for what was right, and his entire world was tilting. He thought about Caroline, about what she would say. She'd have been proud of him for standing up to Preston, but she'd also be worried practical woman that she'd been. She'd want him to focus on protecting Sophie, on finding a new job, on being smart instead of noble. But he couldn't regret what he'd done. Even now, facing unemployment and uncertainty, he couldn't regret it, because Sophie had watched him stand up for someone who needed help. She'd seen him be the man he wanted her to think he was. That had to count for something. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of sunshine that felt like a mockery of his situation. Terence had barely slept, his mind churning through possibilities, each one bleaker than the last. He'd spent the pre-dawn hours on his laptop, searching job postings, realizing with growing dread how specialized his supervisory position had been. Most manufacturing jobs wanted younger workers willing to start at the bottom. At 48, with a daughter to support, he didn't have the luxury of entry-level wages. Sophie bounced into the kitchen, oblivious to the weight pressing on his shoulders. Are we still going to meet Miss Lenora today? He'd almost forgotten. The coffee shop, right. Yes, sweetheart. Get dressed, okay? Something nice? She disappeared back into her room, singing something under her breath. Terence envied her ability to exist in the moment, unburdened by worry about the future. He pulled on his best jeans, the ones without holes, and a button-down shirt Caroline had bought him years ago. It was slightly faded now, but still respectable. The coffee shop Lenora had suggested was in a part of town Terence rarely visited. The buildings were newer here. The streets cleaner, lined with boutiques and upscale restaurants. The coffee shop itself had floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick walls, and prices that made him wince when he looked at the menu board. "Daddy, this place is fancy," Sophie whispered, as wide as she took in the marble countertops and the espresso machine that looked like something from a spaceship. "It's nice," he agreed, feeling distinctly out of place in his faded shirt. "Terence." Lenora waved from a corner table. She looked different outside the diner, wearing jeans and a simple sweater, but even Terence could tell they weren't from the same stores he shopped at. Everything about her spoke of quiet money, the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Sophie ran over to her, and Lenora greeted her with genuine warmth, complimenting her dress and asking about school. Terence followed more slowly, hyper-aware of the other patrons. Young professionals with laptops, mothers in yoga pants with designer purses, everyone seeming to belong here in a way he didn't. "Thank you for coming," Lenora said once they'd settled. "Can I order something for you? They have amazing pastries, and the hot chocolate here is—" "We're fine," Terence said quickly. Lenora's eyes met his, understanding passing between them. "Humor me, please? I asked you here after all." Before he could protest, she was at the counter, ordering what seemed like half the pastry case and 3 drinks. Sophie watched with delight as the server prepared an elaborate hot chocolate topped with whipped cream and chocolate shavings. "You didn't have to do that," Terence said when Lenora returned. "I wanted to." She pushed a coffee toward him, added cream and sugar without asking, somehow knowing exactly how he took it. "Now tell me what happened. Everything." He did, keeping his voice low so Sophie, who was happily working on her hot chocolate and a chocolate croissant, wouldn't hear the worry in his words. The phone call, the abrupt termination, his suspicions about Preston's involvement, though he had no proof. Lenora listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker. When he finished, she sat back, her hands wrapped around her own coffee cup. "It was Preston," she said flatly. "I'd bet my life on it, but how? How could he work that fast?" "Because that's what men like him do. They have connections, favors owed, people they've helped who owe them. One phone call to someone on your company's board, a hint that there might be trouble if they don't cooperate." She shook her head. "It's not right, but it's how their world works." "Their world," Terence repeated. "You talk about it like you know it." Lenora was quiet for a moment, watching Sophie, who had found some crayons and paper and was drawing contentedly. "I do know it. I know it because I grew up in it. You grew up—" He stopped, confused. "I don't understand. My father is Richard Whitmore." The name meant nothing to Terence. Lenora must have seen the blank look on his face because she smiled sadly. "Richard Whitmore. Whitmore Industries. He's a billionaire, Terence. Real estate, technology, investments. My family has more money than most people see in 10 lifetimes. Terence sat back, the words not quite computing. "But you work at the crossroads. You're a waitress." "I am," she confirmed, "because I wanted to know what real life was like. Not the life I was born into. Private schools, country clubs, society parties where everyone is fake and shallow and only cares about money and status. I wanted to meet real people. People who work hard for what they have, who treat each other with respect because it's the right thing to do, not because of what they can gain." So this whole time, Terence felt something close to betrayal stirring in his chest. "You've been pretending?" "No." Lenora leaned forward, earnest. "I've been trying to be myself for the first time in my life. The person at the diner, that's who I really am. Not the socialite my parents want me to be. Not the woman who attends charity galas and smiles for photographers. That's the mask. This is real." Sophie looked up from her drawing. "Are you a secret princess?" Lenora laughed, the sound breaking the tension. "Sort of, sweetie. But not a very good one. I ran away from the castle." "That's very brave," Sophie said seriously. "In my books, the brave princesses are always the best ones. Your daughter is wise." Lenora's smile faded as she looked back at Terence. "I should have told you sooner. I wanted to after what you did for me, but I was afraid you'd treat me differently if you knew." "I don't know how to process this," Terence admitted. "You have all that money, all those resources, and you're working at a diner?" "Because that's where I wanted to be. where I could be useful and real, and she stopped. I'm sorry. I know this is a lot, and I know your first instinct is probably to refuse any help from me. But please, Terence, let me help. Preston went after you because of me, because you defended me. That makes this my responsibility. It's not your responsibility. I made my own choice, and I respect that. But you made that choice, not knowing what kind of enemy you were making. Preston Caldwell is a monster. He's done this before. Destroyed people who crossed him, ruined lives for sport. I know because he's tried to control me too. He wants to marry into my family, thinks I'm some kind of prize he can win. Terence rubbed his face, exhausted. So what are you saying? I'm saying, let me help you find another job. I have connections, good people, not like Preston. Companies that would be lucky to have someone with your experience and integrity. Let me make some calls. Pride warred with practicality in Terence's chest. He had bills to pay, a daughter to feed. But accepting help from a billionaire's daughter felt like charity, like admitting he couldn't take care of his own family. I don't want special treatment, he said finally. I want to earn whatever position I get. You will, Lenora promised. I'm just opening doors. You'll have to walk through them yourself. But Terence, her voice grew serious, you need to understand what you're dealing with. Preston won't stop with your job. Men like him, when their ego is bruised, they escalate. He'll come after everything. Your reputation, your home, maybe even try to prove you're an unfit parent. He can't do that. I'm a good father. I know you are. But he has lawyers, investigators, money to make problems appear out of nowhere. I've seen him do it. She reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of touching his. Please, let me help. Not because you can't handle this yourself, but because you shouldn't have to fight alone. Terence looked at his daughter, humming while she drew a picture of the three of them at this fancy coffee shop. Sophie's world was still safe, still innocent. She didn't know they were teetering on the edge of financial disaster. Didn't know that a man in an expensive suit had decided to destroy them for the crime of basic human decency. Okay, he said quietly, but I pay my own way. Any job I get, I work for. No favors, no special treatment. Just a fair chance. Lenora's face flooded with relief. That's all I'm offering. A chance? She pulled out her phone. I have a friend who runs a logistics company. They're always looking for experienced supervisors. Would that interest you? What kind of logistics? Distribution, supply chain management? You'd be overseeing warehouse operations, coordinating shipments. It's good work, honest work. And the pay is competitive. It was more than he'd dared hope for. I'd be interested, yes. I'll set up an interview. For Monday, if possible. Lenora typed something on her phone. In the meantime, is there anything else you need? Anything I can do? Terence hesitated. Tell me the truth. Are we in danger? Sophie and me? I don't think Preston would physically harm you. He's too smart for that, too aware of the legal consequences. But financially, professionally, yes, you're in danger. He'll try to make your life impossible until you're broken. She met his eyes steadily. But he doesn't know what I know, that you're stronger than you look, that you don't break easily. How do you know that? Because you've been raising a daughter alone for 5 years while working a demanding job. Because you stood up to a bully when everyone else looked away. Because you're sitting here, job gone, future uncertain, and you're still thinking about how to protect your child instead of yourself. She smiled. That's strength, Terence. Real strength. The kind Preston has never understood. They spent another hour in the coffee shop, the conversation shifting to lighter things. Lenora asked about Sophie's school, her interests, her dreams. She engaged with his daughter in a way that felt genuine, not patronizing. And Terence found himself relaxing, laughing even, forgetting for moments at a time the precarious situation they were in. When they finally left, Sophie clutching a bag of cookies Lenora had insisted on buying for later, Terence felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Hope. Maybe not everything was lost. Maybe with help they could weather this storm. Can we see Miss Lenora again? Sophie asked on the drive home. I think so, sweetheart. Good, I like her. She's nice. And she listens when I talk, really listens. Not like some grown-ups who just pretend. out of the mouths of babes, Terence thought. Sophie had seen what he was only beginning to understand, that beneath the wealth and the secrets, Lenora was exactly who she claimed to be. Someone who valued real connection over superficial status. Someone who saw people, not positions. His phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. His stomach clenched, remembering the call that had destroyed his world. But this message was different. Interview scheduled Monday, 10 a.m. Ashford Logistics. As for Bernard Ashford, good luck. Terence saved the information, then on impulse saved Lenora's number in his contacts. Not under her full name, just L. A small rebellion against the complexity she represented, reducing her to something simple and manageable, a friend. Maybe the first real friend he'd made in years. Monday morning arrived with a mix of nervous energy and cautious optimism. Terence stood in front of his closet, staring at the limited options available. He'd borrowed a suit jacket from his neighbor, Mr. Kowalski, who'd been understanding when Terence explained he had an important interview. The jacket was slightly too big in the shoulders, but it would do. "You look very handsome, Daddy," Sophie said from his bedroom doorway. She was already dressed for school, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Thank you, sweetheart." He adjusted his tie, one of only two he owned, both gifts from Caroline years ago. "Mrs. Kowalski is going to pick you up from school today, okay? I might be late. Because of your interview with Miss Lenora's friend?" "That's right." Sophie came over and straightened his tie with the seriousness of a general inspecting troops. "You're going to do great. You're the best supervisor in the whole world." Her faith in him was both heartwarming and heartbreaking. "I love you, you know that." "I know," she hugged him tight. "Love you too." Ashford Logistics was housed in a modern building on the outskirts of the city, all glass and steel and efficient design. Terence arrived 15 minutes early, sitting in his car to collect himself. This was it. A real chance at a good job, one that could provide stability for Sophie, rebuild what Preston had tried to destroy. The reception area was professional but warm, with comfortable chairs and walls decorated with photos of the company's operations. A young woman at the desk smiled when he approached. "Terence Walker, here to see Mr. Ashford." "Of course. He's expecting you. Can I get you some water or coffee while you wait?" "Water would be great, thank you." She returned with a bottle of water, just as a door opened and a man emerged. Bernard Ashford was in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of weathered face that spoke of years spent working, not just managing. He wore slacks and a polo shirt with the company logo, practical rather than flashy. "Mr. Walker," he extended his hand. "Bernard Ashford. Come on back." His office was surprisingly modest, functional furniture, walls covered with operational charts and schedules rather than awards or ego displays. Bernard gestured to a chair and settled behind his desk. "Lenora speaks highly of you," he began. "Says you're a man of integrity who knows how to lead people. She's kind to say so. I've been a supervisor for the past 8 years at Patterson Manufacturing. Before that, I worked my way up from the floor. 15 years total," she mentioned. Bernard leaned back. "What made you leave?" Here it was, the moment he'd been dreading. Tell the truth and risk seeming like trouble? Or lie and build his new opportunity on dishonesty? "I was let go," Terence said, choosing truth. "Corporate restructuring," they said, though I suspect it had more to do with a personal conflict with someone who has connections. "Preston Caldwell?" Terence's surprise must have shown on his face, because Bernard smiled grimly. "Lenora told me what happened. How you stood up for her when he was bullying her at that diner. How he retaliated by getting you fired." He leaned forward. "Let me tell you something about Preston Caldwell. I've known him for 20 years. He's a vindictive, petty man who uses his money like a weapon. The fact that you stood up to him tells me more about your character than any resume ever could. I just did what anyone should have done, but most don't. That's the point." Bernard opened a folder on his desk. "I've checked your references, the ones I could reach who aren't tied to corporate at Patterson. Your crew loved you, said you were fair, that you fought for them, that you never asked them to do anything you wouldn't do yourself. That's the kind of leader I need here." Hope flickered in Terence's chest. What would the position entail? For the next hour, they discussed the job, overseeing warehouse operations, managing a team of 40, coordinating with drivers and clients, ensuring efficiency and safety. The work was similar to what he'd been doing, but with more autonomy, more responsibility. And the pay, when Bernard mentioned the salary, was more than Terence had been making at Patterson. When could you start? Bernard asked. Terence stopped, afraid to believe it. Are you offering me the position? If you want it. 2-week probationary period, standard procedure. But yes, I'm offering. Bernard extended his hand. What do you say? Terence shook it, his throat tight. Yes, thank you. You won't regret this. I don't think I will. Bernard walked him to the door. One more thing. Don't let Preston intimidate you. He's a bully, and bullies only win when good people stay quiet. You keep being who you are, and we'll handle whatever he throws our way. Terence left the building feeling lighter than he had in days. A good job with a decent man who valued integrity over politics. He couldn't wait to tell Sophie, couldn't wait till his phone rang. Lenora, how did it go? She asked, barely letting him say hello. I got it, the job. I start next Monday. Her delighted laugh came through the phone. I knew you would. Bernard's a good judge of character. He wouldn't have hired you just because I recommended you. He hired you because you're qualified and capable. Thank you. For this, for everything. You're welcome. Listen, are you free this afternoon? There's someone I'd like you to meet. My father. Terence stopped walking. Your father? The billionaire. The billionaire who's also just a man who cares about his daughter. He knows about Preston, about what happened. He wants to help. Lenora, I know you don't need it. But sometimes accepting help isn't weakness. It's wisdom. Her voice softened. Please, just meet him. If you hate him or feel uncomfortable, we leave. No pressure. Against his better judgment, Terence found himself agreeing. They arranged to meet at a restaurant. Nothing too fancy, Lenora promised, at 3 o'clock. He picked up Sophie from school, Mrs. Kowalski beaming when he told her about the job. Sophie squealed with delight, throwing her arms around him in the parking lot. I knew it. I knew you'd get it, I did. Which means things are going to be okay. He kissed the top of her head. We're going to be okay. At home he changed into more casual clothes, still his best but not borrowed. Sophie insisted on coming with him, and he didn't have the heart to say no. She loved Lenora, and if they were meeting Lenora's father, Sophie wanted to be there. The restaurant was indeed not too fancy, a bistro-style place with outdoor seating and a relaxed atmosphere. Lenora was already there, sitting with a man who had to be her father. Richard Whitmore was in his late 60s, tall and distinguished with grey hair and kind eyes. He wore slacks and a button-down shirt, no tie, no pretense. He stood when they approached, and his smile was genuine. You must be Terence, and this must be Sophie. He crouched down to Sophie's level. Your father is quite a hero, young lady. I know, Sophie said proudly. He's the best daddy ever. I can see that. Richard straightened, shaking Terence's hand firmly. Thank you for coming. I know this is unusual. They settled at the table, and Richard ordered lemonade for Sophie and iced tea for the adults. For a few minutes, they made small talk, Richard asking Sophie about school, her interests, treating her with the same respect he'd give an adult. Terence began to relax. This wasn't what he'd expected. No power plays, no condescension, just a father worried about his daughter. Lenora tells me you stood up to Preston Caldwell, Richard said once Sophie was absorbed in colouring a page the restaurant had provided. That took courage. It took basic decency. He was being cruel. Most people define decency as not getting involved. You chose differently. Richard sipped his tea. Preston has been a thorn in my side for years. He's tried to position himself within my business circles, tried to court my daughter. Dad, Lenora interjected, embarrassed. It's true. He sees people as assets or obstacles. Nothing in between. Richard's expression hardened. And now he's coming after you because you had the audacity to remind him that money doesn't excuse bad behavior. I'm handling it, Terence said. I got a new job. We'll be fine, will you? Richard pulled out his phone, scrolling through something. Because Preston has hired a private investigator. He's building a case against you, claims you threatened him, that you're unstable, that you might be an unfit parent. The words hit Terence like a physical blow. What? It's all lies, of course. But he's documenting everything. Where you live, where Sophie goes to school, your finances. He's looking for any crack he can exploit. Terence felt sick. He's investigating my daughter. He's investigating your whole life. Richard put away his phone. That's why I wanted to meet. Not to scare you, but to prepare you. Men like Preston don't play fair. And you need to understand what you're up against. I can't afford lawyers. I can barely afford... Terence stopped, aware of Sophie nearby. You don't need to afford anything. I have lawyers, good ones, and they're at your disposal if you need them. I can't accept that. Why not? Richard's voice was gentle but firm. Because of pride? Because you think accepting help makes you less of a man? Let me tell you something I learned the hard way. Being strong doesn't mean standing alone. It means knowing when to accept the hand that's offered. Lenora touched her father's arm. Dad, maybe ease up a bit. I'm not trying to push, Richard said. I'm trying to make sure you understand. Preston won't stop. He'll escalate until you're destroyed or you fight back. And fighting back requires resources you don't have. Resources I do. Terence looked at his daughter, happily coloring, oblivious to the threat hanging over them. Then at Lenora, who'd been nothing but kind and honest. And finally at Richard, a man who could have sent a representative or written a check, but instead had shown up in person to offer help. What would this help look like? He asked carefully. Legal protection. If Preston files any kind of claim or lawsuit, my attorneys handle it. If he continues to harass you, we document it and build a counter case. If he tries to sabotage your new job, which he will, we make sure Bernard and his company are protected too. And what do you get out of this? Richard smiled. Peace of mind knowing my daughter's friend is safe, and the satisfaction of watching Preston Caldwell finally face consequences for his behavior. It was too much, too generous. But as Terence watched Sophie, heard Richard's words about investigators documenting her school, her life, he realized he didn't have the luxury of pride. This wasn't just about him anymore. Okay, he said quietly, but I pay it back, somehow, when I can. The only payment I want is for you to keep being the kind of man who stands up when others won't. Richard raised his glass to standing up. Terence clinked his glass against Richard's, then Lenora's, feeling the weight of obligation settling on his shoulders alongside the relief of not facing this alone. 2 weeks into his new job, Terence was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to work out. The work at Ashford Logistics was challenging but fulfilling. His team respected him, Bernard trusted his judgment, and the pay allowed him to breathe easier when he looked at his bills. He'd even managed to take Sophie out for ice cream, a small luxury that felt monumental after weeks of penny pinching. But the feeling of being watched never quite left him. It was subtle at first. A car that seemed to be parked across from his building too often. The same man in a coffee shop near Sophie's school 2 days in a row. Terence told himself he was being paranoid. That Preston's threats were just that, empty words meant to intimidate. Then the email arrived. It came to his personal account, from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line read simply, "You should see this." Against his better judgment, Terence opened it. Inside was a link to a document, a dossier really, on him. Photos of his apartment building, time-stamped images of him and Sophie leaving for school, arriving home. Details about his finances, his employment history, even Caroline's death certificate. Everything laid out like evidence in a case against him. At the bottom, a message. "You made this personal. Now I'll show you what personal really means." PC Terence's hands shook as he forwarded the email to Lenora, then to Richard's attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia who'd given him her direct number. Within an hour, his phone rang. "Mr. Walker, this is Patricia Crane. I've seen the email. This constitutes harassment and possibly stalking. I'm filing a restraining order petition first thing tomorrow morning. Will that stop him? It'll give us legal standing and documentation. If he violates it, there are real consequences. Even men with money can't ignore court orders forever. Her voice was clinical, professional. But Mr. Walker, I need to prepare you. This might get worse before it gets better. Preston is clearly escalating. What else can he do? Several things. He could file false claims with child services, force you to defend yourself as a parent. He could interfere with your employment again, though Mr. Ashford has been briefed and won't budge. He could— She paused. He could make things very difficult for Ms. Whitmore as well. Use her connection to you as leverage with her family. The thought of Lenora suffering because of him made Terrence's stomach turn. Maybe I should just, apologize to him. Make this stop? Would you mean it? No, then don't. Men like Preston can smell insincerity. And even if you did apologize, he wouldn't stop. He's enjoying this too much. The hunt— Patricia's tone softened slightly. You did nothing wrong, Mr. Walker, remember that. You stood up for someone who needed help. You don't apologize for doing the right thing. After they hung up, Terrence sat at his kitchen table, looking at Sophie's drawings on the refrigerator. Happy scenes of their life, the two of them at the park, at the diner, playing together. Her world was still innocent, still safe in the way childhood should be. How long before Preston's poison reached her? His phone buzzed. Lenora, are you okay? No, he admitted. I'm angry and scared and I don't know what to do. Can I come over? Or you come here? You shouldn't be alone right now. Sophie's asleep. I can't leave her, then I'm coming to you. 10 minutes, Terrence almost argued, but found he didn't want to. The thought of company, of not sitting alone with his fear and rage, was too appealing. She arrived carrying a bag from a local bakery and a thermos. Cookies and tea. My grandmother's cure for everything. They sat at his small kitchen table, the apartment quiet around them. Terrence hadn't realized how rarely he had adult company here. Since Caroline died, his world had shrunk to work and Sophie. Even his friendships had faded, casualties of exhaustion and lack of time. This is a nice place, Lenora said, looking around. It feels like a home. It's small, old. The heat doesn't always work great in winter. It's still a home. I can feel the love here. She poured tea into 2 mugs. That's more valuable than square footage. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, then Lenora spoke. I'm sorry. This is my fault. If I hadn't been working at that diner, if you hadn't felt compelled to defend me, don't. Terrence's voice was firm. Don't take responsibility for his actions. Preston is doing this because he's a cruel person who can't handle being challenged. That's on him, not you. Still, you've lost so much because of me. I've also gained something. The words surprised him even as he said them. A friend. Maybe the first real friend I've had in years. Someone who sees me as just me. Not a single parent struggling to get by. Not someone to pity or judge. Just Terrence. Lenora's eyes were bright with emotion. You see me the same way. Not as Richard Whitmore's daughter. Not as a trust fund princess slumming it in the real world. Just Lenora. Is that your real name? Or is it something fancy like Lenora Elizabeth Victoria Whitmore III? She laughed. Just Lenora. Well, Lenora Ann Whitmore. But no the third, I promise. Good. Too many syllables. They fell into easier conversation then, trading stories from their childhoods. Hers of privilege and isolation, his of modest means but strong community. Lenora described feeling like a prisoner in a gilded cage, where every action was scrutinized, every friendship potentially about money or connections rather than genuine affection. Terrence talked about Caroline, really talked about her for the first time in years. The grief was still there, but softer now, mixed with gratitude for the time they'd had. She sounds like she was wonderful, Lenora said. She was. She would have liked you. Terrence smiled. She always said the best judge of character was how people treated service workers. You treated everyone at that diner like they mattered. They do matter, I know. That's why Caroline would have liked you. A noise from Sophie's room, a small cry, probably a dream. Terrence stood immediately, but before he could move, Sophie appeared in the hallway. Her stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. Daddy, I heard voices. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Miss Lenora came to visit. Did we wake you? No, I had a bad dream. Sophie padded over, and without hesitation, Lenora opened her arms. Sophie climbed into her lap, nestling against her like it was the most natural thing in the world. What was the dream about? Lenora asked gently, smoothing Sophie's hair. A mean man was trying to take Daddy away, and I couldn't stop him. Terence and Lenora exchanged glances over Sophie's head. The child was more aware than they'd thought. Kids always were. No one is taking your daddy away, Lenora said firmly. I promise you that. There are lots of people making sure your daddy stays right where he belongs, with you. Really? Really. My dad, my lawyers, Mr. Ashford at your daddy's work, we're all making sure you two stay together. Because you're a team, right? The best team, Sophie confirmed, her voice already growing sleepy again. Terence carried her back to bed, tucking her in and kissing her forehead. When he returned to the kitchen, Lenora was rinsing their mugs. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She dried her hands on a towel. She's amazing, Terence. You've done such a good job with her. Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping it together. That's called being a parent. My father says he felt that way until I turned 30. He's still not sure he got it right. He did. You turned out pretty well. So did Sophie. Lenora gathered her things. I should go. Let you get some sleep. But Terence, she paused at the door. Thank you for letting me be part of this. Part of your lives. It means more than you know. After she left, Terence stood in his quiet apartment and realized something had shifted. He'd been alone for so long, carrying everything by himself, that he'd forgotten what it felt like to have someone in his corner. Not just physically present, but emotionally invested. Someone who cared not because they had to, but because they chose to. The next morning, Patricia called with news. The restraining order had been filed and would be heard in court the following week. Preston would be notified, warned to stay away from Terence and his family. But she also warned him. Preston had filed a counter-motion claiming Terence was the actual harasser, that the diner incident had been an unprovoked attack. He's lying, Terence said flatly. I know. And we have witnesses to prove it. But this is his strategy. Muddy the waters. Make it look like both sides are equally at fault. It's manipulative, but sometimes effective. What do? We go to court. We present the facts. And we trust that truth matters. Terence wished he had Patricia's confidence. In his experience, truth didn't always win. Money and power had their own kind of momentum, their own gravity that bent reality around them. But he had to believe. For Sophie's sake, he had to believe that doing the right thing wouldn't be punished forever. That somewhere, in some courthouse, justice still meant something. The week crawled by. Work was his refuge. Clear problems with clear solutions, people who valued competence over connections. Bernard pulled him aside one afternoon, telling him that Preston had indeed tried to interfere, calling in favors to make trouble for Ashford Logistics. But Bernard had stood firm, even when it cost him a lucrative contract. Why? Terence asked. Why risk your business for me? Bernard smiled. Because some things matter more than money, like not letting bullies win. Like standing by good people when they're under attack. He clapped Terence on the shoulder. Besides, any client who'd drop us because we won't fire an honest man isn't a client worth having. The day of the court hearing arrived. Terence wore his borrowed suit again, freshly cleaned. Lenora met him at the courthouse, along with her father and Patricia. The attorney was all business. Reviewing what would happen, what he should say, how to stay calm no matter what Preston claimed. Preston arrived with his own legal team, 3 lawyers in expensive suits, briefcases that probably cost more than Terence's monthly rent. He smiled when he saw Terence, a predator's smile, full of confidence and contempt. This is going to be fun, he said loud enough for Terence to hear. Patricia put a hand on Terence's arm. Don't react. That's what he wants. The hearing was called. They entered the courtroom, and Terence felt the weight of the moment settle on his shoulders. This was it, the beginning of the fight that would determine whether standing up for what was right would cost him everything, or whether, just maybe, the universe still had room for justice. The courtroom was smaller than Terence had imagined, more bureaucratic than dramatic. Fluorescent lights, beige walls, a judge who looked tired before the proceedings even began. Judge Morrison was a woman in her 60s, with reading glasses perched on her nose and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie and excuse the world had to offer. "This is a petition for a restraining order," she began, reviewing the documents in front of her. "Mr. Walker claims that Mr. Caldwell has been harassing him following an incident at a local diner. Mr. Caldwell has filed a counterclaim that Mr. Walker was the initial aggressor. Let's hear from both sides." Patricia stood, professional and composed. "Your Honor, my client, Terence Walker, witnessed Mr. Caldwell verbally abusing a waitress at the Crossroads Diner. He politely asked Mr. Caldwell to stop. Mr. Caldwell responded with threats and has since engaged in a campaign of harassment. That includes having Mr. Walker fired from his job, hiring a private investigator to document his private life, and sending intimidating emails. We have documentation of all of this." Preston's lead attorney, a sharp-faced man named Grayson, stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell was simply having a bad day and expressing his frustration with poor service. Mr. Walker approached him aggressively, threatened him in front of witnesses, and has since been spreading false narratives about my client. This restraining order is retaliatory and without merit. I'd like to hear from the principals," Judge Morrison said. "Mr. Walker, tell me what happened that night." Terence stood, his mouth dry. He'd never been comfortable with public speaking, but he forced himself to meet the judge's eyes. "Your Honor, I was having dinner with my 8-year-old daughter. We go to the Crossroads every Tuesday. I watched Mr. Caldwell treat our waitress with disrespect, calling her names, snapping his fingers at her, deliberately spilling water and making her clean it up repeatedly. When he demanded she apologize on her knees, I stood up and asked him to treat her with basic respect. He threatened me, said he'd destroy me. 3 hours later, I was fired from a job I'd held for 15 years. Can you prove the connection between the incident and your termination?" "Not directly, Your Honor, but the timing was coincidental," Grayson interrupted. "Your Honor, Patterson Manufacturing has provided documentation that Mr. Walker's position was eliminated due to restructuring. This had nothing to do with my client." Patricia pulled out a folder. "Your Honor, we've obtained testimony from Mr. Walker's former supervisor stating that the order to terminate came directly from corporate after a phone call from someone on the board, a board member who happens to golf regularly with Mr. Caldwell." Judge Morrison's eyebrow raised slightly. "Interesting. Continue." For the next hour they presented evidence back and forth. Patricia showed the judge Preston's email with the dossier, the photos of Sophie, the documentation of the private investigator. Grayson claimed it was all standard due diligence for a potential lawsuit, that Preston had every right to defend himself. Then Patricia played her trump card. "Your Honor, we'd like to present video evidence from the Crossroads Diner's security cameras." Grayson stood immediately. "Objection. We weren't informed of any video evidence because we only obtained it yesterday," Patricia said smoothly. "The diner manager was initially reluctant to get involved, but changed his mind when he learned the extent of Mr. Caldwell's harassment campaign. The footage is time-stamped and authenticated," Judge Morrison considered. "I'll allow it. Let's see what we have." A laptop was set up and the courtroom went quiet as the video played. There, in grainy but clear footage, was everything Terence had described. Preston's cruelty, his deliberate provocations, Lenora's attempts to remain professional. And then Terence's intervention, calm, measured, never aggressive, but it was Preston's final moments on camera that made the real impact. As he was leaving, he turned back to Terence, and though there was no audio, his lips were clearly readable. "I'll destroy you." The courtroom was silent when the video ended. Judge Morrison removed her glasses, cleaning them slowly. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm going to ask you directly. Did you have Mr. Walker fired?" Preston stood, confident despite the evidence. "Your Honor, I may have mentioned the incident to a colleague. I didn't specifically ask anyone to fire him, but you knew it would happen. That wasn't my intent, wasn't it?" The judge's voice was sharp. "Mr. Caldwell, I've been on this bench for 23 years. I've seen countless cases of powerful people using the legal system to punish those who can't fight back. The evidence here is clear. You engaged in harassment, retaliation, and intimidation. I'm granting the restraining order. You are to stay at least 500 feet from Mr. Walker, his daughter, his home, and his place of employment. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. Preston's face went red. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Furthermore, Judge Morrison continued, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for review. Some of your actions may constitute criminal harassment and stalking. Grayson was on his feet. Your Honor, my client is a respected businessman. Your client is a bully who thought his money put him above basic human decency. The judge's gaze was stern. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down, and Terence felt his knees go weak. Patricia gripped his arm, steadying him. You won, she said quietly. It's over. But even as relief flooded through him, Terence saw Preston's face across the courtroom. The humiliation there, the rage barely contained. And he knew it wasn't over. Not really. They exited into the courthouse hallway, where Lenora and Richard were waiting. Lenora hugged him immediately. I'm so proud of you. You stood your ground. The judge stood it for me, Terence said. But thank you. All of you. Richard shook his hand. Justice prevails sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. They were heading toward the exit when a commotion behind them made everyone turn. Preston had emerged from the courtroom, his lawyers trying to calm him, but he shook them off. His eyes locked on Terence with pure hatred. You think this is over? Preston's voice echoed through the marble hallway. You think a piece of paper stops me? I'll appeal. I'll file suit. I'll make your life hell until Mr. Caldwell. A new voice, sharp and authoritative. A woman in a business suit approached, flanked by two men who had the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement. I'm Detective Sarah Brennan with the District Attorney's Office. We'd like to ask you some questions about your conduct in this matter. I don't have to answer anything without my attorney. That's your right. But I should inform you, we've been investigating you for some time. Multiple complaints from individuals you've harassed over the years. This case with Mr. Walker was just the most recent. We'd like to discuss a pattern of behavior that suggests you've been using your wealth and influence to intimidate and harm people. Preston's confidence finally cracked. This is harassment. I'm being targeted because I'm successful. No, sir. You're being investigated because you're a predator. Detective Brennan's voice was calm but firm. We'll be in touch. She nodded to Terence and his group before walking away, leaving Preston standing in the hallway with his lawyers whispering urgently around him. In the car later, driving back to pick up Sophie from school, Terence still felt like he was in a dream. Did that really just happen? He asked Lenora, who'd insisted on riding with him. It did. Preston finally pushed too far, targeted the wrong person. You stood up, and that gave others the courage to come forward too. Others? Patricia's been collecting statements. People Preston destroyed over the years, people too scared to speak out before. But when they heard about your case, heard that someone was finally fighting back, they came forward. There are 7 other victims willing to testify about his pattern of behavior. Terence processed this. So this was never just about me. No, you were just the catalyst. The person brave enough to say enough. Lenora looked out the window. Do you know what's funny? My father has been trying to build a case against Preston for years. The man has been a cancer in business circles, but he was always too careful, too protected. Then you came along, just a dad trying to teach his daughter right from wrong, and you did what teams of lawyers couldn't do. You exposed him. I just asked him to be decent. Exactly. And he couldn't handle that simple request. His ego, his need to dominate it made him sloppy. Made him cross lines even his money and connections couldn't protect. They pulled up to Sophie's school. The little girl came running out, her backpack bouncing, her face lighting up when she saw Lenora in the car. Miss Lenora, are you coming to dinner with us? If your dad doesn't mind. I don't mind, Terence said, and realized he meant it. Having Lenora around had become natural, comfortable. She fit into their lives in a way he hadn't expected, filling spaces he hadn't realized were empty. Over pizza that evening, Sophie's choice, they celebrated quietly. Terence didn't tell his daughter all the details, just that the mean man from the diner wouldn't be bothering them anymore. Sophie seemed satisfied with that, more interested in telling them about her day at school and showing off the gold star she'd earned on her spelling test. Later, after Sophie was in bed, Terence and Lenora sat in his small living room. "Tired but content. What happens now?" Terence asked. "With Preston, I mean. Honestly, I don't know. The DA might prosecute, might not. He could face fines, community service, maybe even jail time, if they prove criminal harassment. Or he might just lose his reputation, his standing in society. For men like Preston, that's sometimes worse than prison. I don't want revenge. I just want to live my life without looking over my shoulder. I know. That's what makes you different from him." Lenora was quiet for a moment. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. What are you going to tell Sophie? About all of this? About standing up? About the cost and the victory?" Terence thought about his daughter sleeping peacefully in her room, about the world he was preparing her to enter. "I'm going to tell her the truth. That doing the right thing isn't always easy. That sometimes it costs you something. Your comfort, your safety, maybe even your job. But that you do it anyway, because being able to look at yourself in the mirror matters more than anything else. And I'm going to tell her that standing up sometimes means accepting help. That being strong includes knowing when you can't do it alone. That's a good lesson. It's one I'm still learning." Terence smiled at her. "Thank you, Lenora, for everything. For being the kind of person worth defending. For defending me back. We defended each other. That's what friends do. Friends." The word settled warmly in Terence's chest. Yes, that's what they were. And maybe someday something more. But for now, friendship was enough. More than enough. 3 weeks passed in something resembling normalcy. Terence settled into his rhythm at Ashford Logistics, earning the respect of his team through consistent leadership and genuine care for their well-being. Sophie thrived with the stability, her grades improving, her smile coming easier. And Lenora had become a fixture in their lives. Sunday afternoon park visits, occasional dinners, quiet moments that felt like the family Terence had thought he'd lost forever. But peace never lasted. It was naive to think Preston would simply accept defeat. The letter arrived on a Tuesday, always a Tuesday, Terence thought with bitter irony. Official letterhead from the law offices of Morrison and Associates. Not Grayson, Preston's previous attorney. Someone new, which meant escalation. Patricia was on the phone within minutes of Terence calling her. "Don't open it," she instructed. "Bring it to my office. Whatever it is, we handle it together." But Terence had already opened it. The words swam before his eyes. Custody investigation, allegations of unfit parenting, emergency hearing. Preston was going after Sophie. "He can't do this," Terence said, his voice hollow. "There's a restraining order. He's not filing it himself. He's using a proxy, someone claiming to be a concerned citizen who witnessed neglect." Patricia's voice was tight with anger. "It's transparent manipulation, but legally they can request an investigation." "What kind of neglect?" "Sophie is my whole world. The complaint alleges you leave her unsupervised, that your apartment is unsafe, that you prioritize your vendetta against Preston over her welfare. All lies, but they have to be investigated." Terence sank into his chair, the office around him fading to background noise. This was his nightmare. Not losing his job, not even his own safety, but someone threatening to take his daughter. What do I do? "You prepare. Document everything. Her schedule, her meals, her grades, her happiness. Get character witnesses. We show the investigator that these claims are baseless and malicious." Patricia paused. "And Terence, this isn't going to be easy. These investigations are invasive. They'll come to your home, interview Sophie's teachers, possibly interview Sophie herself." The thought of his daughter being questioned, being scared, made Terence's stomach turn. "How do I explain this to her?" "As simply as possible. That some people tell lies, and we have to prove the truth." That evening, Lenora came over. Terence had asked her to, needing the support, but also needing her advice on how to talk to Sophie. She listened quietly as he explained the situation, her face growing pale. "This is my fault," she said. If I'd never... Don't. Terrence's voice was firm despite his fear. Preston is responsible for his own actions. Not you, not me, him. Let me help. My father has connections with child services. We can make sure the investigator assigned is impartial, not someone Preston can influence. Is that ethical? Is what Preston's doing ethical? Lenora's eyes flashed with anger. He's using the system designed to protect children as a weapon. We're just making sure the system works the way it's supposed to. They called Sophie into the living room. She came clutching her stuffed rabbit, sensing the serious mood. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about something," Terrence began, choosing his words carefully. "Remember the mean man from the diner?" Sophie nodded, her eyes wide. "He's still being mean. He told some lies about me, about how I take care of you. So some people are going to come talk to us, ask questions, to make sure you're happy and safe." "But I am happy and safe," Sophie said, confused. "You're the best, Daddy." "I know. And that's what we're going to show them. But they might ask you questions about our home, about school, about if I'm nice to you. You just tell them the truth, okay? Always the truth. What if the truth isn't what they want to hear?" The question was so perceptive, so beyond her years, that Terence had to blink back tears. The truth is always what they should want to hear. "Good people care about truth." Sophie climbed into his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I won't let them take you away from me, and I won't let anyone take you away from me," Terence promised, holding her tight. "We're a team, remember? The best team." The investigation began the next day. A woman named Mrs. Kowalski, not his neighbor, a different Kowalski, arrived at the apartment with a clipboard and a neutral expression that revealed nothing. She walked through their home, checking for safety hazards, adequate food, clean conditions. She asked Terence questions about his work schedule, Sophie's routine, his support system. "Who helps you with childcare?" she asked. "My neighbor watches Sophie if I'm running late from work. Lenora Whitmore has also been helping. She's a close friend." Mrs. Kowalski's pen paused. "Richard Whitmore's daughter?" "Yes." "Interesting." She made a note. "And your relationship with Ms. Whitmore is?" "Friendship. She's been supportive since all this started with Preston Caldwell." More notes. "I'll need to interview her as well." The interviews continued over several days. Sophie's teachers all glowing in their praise. Bernard Ashford, vouching for Terence's character and reliability. The neighbors, describing him as a devoted father. And Lenora, who apparently gave such a strong testimony about Terence's parenting that Mrs. Kowalski seemed taken aback by her passion. But there was still the official report, the final recommendation. That wouldn't come for another week. The waiting was agony. Terence went through the motions of work, of dinner and homework and bedtime stories. But his mind was always on the investigation, on the possibility of losing Sophie. On Friday evening, Patricia called with an update. The investigator's preliminary report is positive. She found no evidence of neglect or unsafe conditions. But Preston's attorney is pushing for a formal hearing anyway, claiming the investigation was biased because of your connection to the Whitmore family. So it's not over. It's not over. There'll be a hearing in front of a family court judge next Thursday. You'll testify, the investigator will present her findings, and the judge will rule on whether there's any merit to the allegations. And if the judge sides with Preston, then we appeal, and we keep fighting until we win. Patricia's voice softened. But Terence, based on what I've seen, you have nothing to worry about. You're a good father. The evidence supports that. Preston is just throwing everything at the wall, hoping something sticks. After hanging up, Terence stood at Sophie's bedroom door watching her sleep. 7 more days until the hearing. 7 more days of uncertainty. But he'd face them the same way he'd faced everything else, with honesty, with courage, and with the love he had for his daughter lighting the way forward. The family courthouse felt different from the civil one. Warmer colors, softer lighting, but the weight of what happened here was heavier. This was where families were torn apart or held together, where children's futures were decided by strangers in robes. Terence sat with Patricia in the waiting area, his suit freshly pressed, his hands clasped to keep them from shaking. Lenora and Richard sat nearby, quiet support. Sophie was with Mrs. Kowalski from next door, not the investigator. His trusted neighbor, kept away from the proceedings as much as possible. "Remember," Patricia said quietly, "answer honestly but don't elaborate unnecessarily. The judge is fair, by all accounts. Judge Catherine Reeves has 20 years on the family bench. She's seen every trick. The doors opened and they were called in. Judge Reeves was a black woman in her 50s, with kind but penetrating eyes. She reviewed the file in front of her with obvious care before looking up. This is a hearing regarding allegations of parental neglect against Terence Walker. Mr. Walker, you understand these are serious accusations?" "Yes, Your Honor." Terence stood when he spoke, remembering Patricia's instructions. "But they're false." "My daughter is everything to me." "We'll determine that, Mrs. Kowalski." She gestured to the investigator who'd entered the courtroom. "Please present your findings." The investigator stood, her report in hand. "Your Honor, I conducted a thorough investigation over 7 days. I visited Mr. Walker's home unannounced, interviewed his daughter's teachers, his employer, his neighbors, and close friends. I also spent time observing the father-daughter interaction. And your conclusions?" "The allegations are completely unfounded. Mr. Walker maintains a clean, safe home. His daughter is well cared for, excelling in school, emotionally healthy and clearly loved. Every person I interviewed spoke of Mr. Walker with genuine respect. He's a devoted single parent who has built a stable, nurturing environment for his child." Judge Reeves made notes. "You found no evidence of neglect whatsoever?" "None, Your Honor. In fact, I found the opposite. A father who prioritizes his daughter's well-being above all else." Preston's new attorney, a woman named Morrison, stood. "Your Honor, the investigator's report is compromised. Mr. Walker has connections to the Whitmore family, one of the wealthiest families in the state. It's reasonable to assume those connections influence the investigation." "That's a serious accusation," Judge Reeves said coldly. "Do you have evidence of impropriety?" "The connection itself suggests nothing without proof. Mrs. Kowalski, did anyone attempt to influence your investigation?" "No, Your Honor. I conducted my work independently and professionally." Morrison tried another angle. "Your Honor, we'd like to call a witness, someone who has observed Mr. Walker's behavior and can speak to his character." "Who?" "Preston Caldwell." The courtroom went silent. Patricia stood immediately. "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell has a restraining order against him. He's the reason these false allegations exist in the first place." "I'm aware of the restraining order," Judge Reeves interrupted. "Mr. Caldwell, you're under oath. Any testimony you give here must be truthful, and you're aware that lying under oath is perjury." Preston stood, his face composed but his eyes hard. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then speak." Preston walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and swore his oath. Terence watched, his jaw tight, as the man who'd tried to destroy his life prepared to lie under oath. "Mr. Caldwell," Morrison began, "please tell the court about your interaction with Mr. Walker." "I was having a difficult day," Preston said, his voice smooth and practiced. "I'll admit I was short with the waitress at the diner, but Mr. Walker approached me aggressively, threatened me physically, created a scene in front of his young daughter. I was concerned then about what kind of environment that child was growing up in." "Objection!" Patricia was on her feet. "Your Honor, we have video evidence that contradicts every word of this testimony. I'd like to see it," Judge Reeves said. The video played again, the same footage from the civil hearing. Preston's cruelty in high definition, Terence's calm intervention, the lies exposed frame by frame. When it finished, Judge Reeves turned to Preston, her expression glacier cold. "Mr. Caldwell, you just committed perjury in my courtroom." "Bailiff." "Your Honor," Preston started. "Save it. You came into my courtroom and lied under oath about a man fighting to keep his daughter. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." She turned to Terence. "Mr. Walker, approach the bench." Terence stood, his legs unsteady. He walked forward, very aware of every eye on him. "Mr. Walker, I've reviewed the evidence, heard the testimony, and watched that video. These allegations against you are not just unfounded, they're malicious. You're clearly a devoted father doing your best in difficult circumstances." Judge Reeves's voice softened slightly. "The petition is dismissed with prejudice. These accusations will be stricken from your record. And Mr. Caldwell, She turned back to Preston. "You're being held in contempt. Bailiff, take him into custody." The courtroom erupted. Preston's attorney was protesting, Patricia was thanking the judge, and Terence stood frozen, trying to process what had just happened. He'd won. Not just the case, he'd won the right to keep being Sophie's father. The bailiff moved toward Preston, but he stepped back, his composure finally shattering completely. "You can't do this. Do you know who I am?" "I have lawyers, connections. You have contempt charges," Judge Reeves said flatly. "And based on this pattern of behavior, I'm recommending to the district attorney that they pursue criminal harassment charges. You've abused the legal system to terrorize a good man and his child. That ends now." Preston's face went from red to white. His attorney was speaking urgently in his ear, but he shook her off. His eyes found Terence across the courtroom, and for a moment pure hatred blazed there. "This is because of you," Preston hissed. "All of this. You couldn't just mind your own business. You had to be a hero. I asked you to be decent," Terence said quietly. "That's all. Just decent. Decent?" Preston laughed, a broken sound. "You destroyed me. My reputation, my standing, everything. Over some waitress you didn't even know. Over basic human dignity," Terence corrected. "Something you've never understood." The bailiff had Preston's arm now, leading him toward the side door. Preston resisted one more moment. "You think you've won? You think this is over?" "I'll appeal, Mr. Caldwell." Judge Reeves' voice cut through his rant like a blade. "Every word you speak right now is making things worse for you. I suggest silence." He was led away, still protesting, still unable to accept that his money and power hadn't saved him this time. The courtroom doors closed behind him, and the tension that had been holding everyone rigid finally released. Patricia turned to Terence, her professional mask cracking into a genuine smile. "You did it. It's really over, is it?" Terence felt like he was in a dream. Can he still appeal? He can try, but he won't win. Not after perjury in open court. Not with Judge Reeves referring him for criminal charges. Preston Caldwell just learned that there are some things money can't buy, like immunity from consequences. Lenora rushed over, wrapping Terence in a hug that he returned gratefully. "I'm so proud of you. You never wavered, never compromised who you are. I had help. A lot of help." Terence looked at her, then at Richard, then at Patricia. "I couldn't have done this alone." "You shouldn't have had to," Richard said, joining them. "But you stood firm when it mattered. That took courage." Outside the courthouse, Terence called Mrs. Kowalski. "Can you bring Sophie?" "It's over. We won." 20 minutes later, Sophie came running across the courthouse plaza, her backpack bouncing. Terence caught her, lifting her up despite her getting too big for it, holding her tight. "Daddy, are you okay?" "Did the judge say I can stay with you?" "The judge said we're a team. The best team. And nothing's going to change that." Sophie buried her face in his shoulder, and he felt her small body shake with relief. She'd been scared, he realized. More scared than she'd let on, trying to be brave for him the way he'd been trying to be brave for her. "I've got you," he whispered. "I'll always have you." That evening, they had a quiet celebration at Terence's apartment. Nothing fancy, just pizza and soda and the four of them sitting around his small living room. Sophie was her normal, cheerful self again, the weight of uncertainty lifted. She showed Richard her drawings, explained her favorite books. Completely comfortable with this billionaire as if he were just another grandpa. "She's remarkable," Richard said quietly to Terence, while Sophie was in the kitchen with Lenora helping make popcorn. "You've raised an exceptional child. I've tried. Some days I wonder if I'm doing enough. Every good parent wonders that. It's the bad ones who are certain they're doing everything right." Richard smiled. "You know, when Lenora first told me about you, I was skeptical. Another person wanting something from her, I thought. But you never wanted anything except friendship. You saw her as a person, not a bank account. That's rare in our world. She's easy to see that way. She's genuine. She is now. She wasn't always. Growing up with money does things to people. Makes them perform, hide their real selves. But you helped her find that genuine part again. For that alone, I'd have helped you. The fact that you're also a good man and father was just confirmation. Lenora and Sophie returned with a bowl of popcorn, laughing about something. Terence watched them together and felt something settle in his chest. Not quite contentment, too much had happened for that, but peace. The storm had passed. The worst was over. Later, after Richard had left and Sophie was in bed, Lenora lingered at the door. "What happens now?" she asked. "With us, I mean. Do we go back to normal? Whatever normal is? I don't know what normal looks like anymore," Terence admitted. "But I know I want you in it. You and your complicated life and your secret billionaire family. All of it. Even if it means more complications, more people judging, more questions about why someone like me is with someone like you. People can think what they want. I learned something through all this. The only opinions that matter are from people who actually know you. Everyone else is just noise." Lenora smiled, and in that smile Terence saw possibility. Not just friendship, though that would always be the foundation, but something more, something deeper. Something neither of them was quite ready to name yet, but both understood was there, waiting. "Same time next Tuesday?" she asked. "At the diner?" "Wouldn't miss it." She left, and Terence stood in his quiet apartment, listening to his daughter's soft breathing from her room. He'd stood up to a bully and somehow come out the other side, not just intact, but stronger. With new friends, new possibilities, and the knowledge that doing the right thing, even when it cost him, had been worth it. Always would be. 6 months later, autumn painted the city in shades of gold and crimson. Terence stood in the parking lot of the Crossroads Diner, the same place where everything had changed, watching Sophie chase falling leaves with unrestrained joy. She was taller now, more confident, her laughter coming easily. Life had found its rhythm again, but it was a different rhythm than before. Better in ways he hadn't expected. The charges against Preston had stuck. Criminal harassment, witness intimidation, perjury. He'd avoided jail time through a plea bargain, but his reputation was destroyed. His business partners had distanced themselves. His social standing evaporated. He'd learned, finally, that money couldn't buy immunity from consequences. Terence felt no satisfaction in Preston's downfall. Just relief that the threat was gone, that Sophie could grow up without that shadow hanging over them. "Daddy!" Sophie ran over, holding a perfect red leaf. "Look, it's heart-shaped." "Beautiful." "Just like you." He tucked it carefully into his jacket pocket. "You ready for dinner?" "Is Miss Lenora coming?" "She is. And she has a surprise for you." Sophie's eyes lit up. Over the past months, Lenora had become a constant in their lives. Not quite a mother figure, but something equally important. A friend, a mentor, someone who showed Sophie that strength came in many forms. They entered the diner, and the familiar warmth embraced them. The staff greeted Terence by name now. Heroes in their own quiet way, for standing up when it mattered. The story had made local news, not the dramatic parts, but the human ones. A single father defending a waitress, standing against a bully, refusing to back down. Lenora was already at their usual booth, and next to her sat Richard. This had become their Tuesday tradition, the four of them sharing a meal like family. "There's my favorite artist," Lenora said as Sophie climbed into the booth. She pulled out a wrapped package. "I saw this and thought of you." Sophie tore open the paper, revealing a professional art set, colored pencils, watercolors, sketch pads. A gasp of delight made everyone smile. "This is too much," Terence started, but Lenora waved him off. "Talent should be nurtured." "She's gifted, Terence. These are tools, not charity." He'd learned to accept her generosity with more grace, understanding that for Lenora, sharing what she had was how she showed love. And he'd learned to share too, his time, his perspective, his world. They taught each other things about living authentically, about finding value beyond wealth or struggle. Over dinner, they talked about ordinary things. Sophie's upcoming school play, where she'd landed the lead role. Bernard's plan to expand Ashford logistics, which meant promotion opportunities for Terence. Richard's new initiative to fund programs for single parents, inspired by watching Terence navigate the system. "You changed my mind about a lot of things," Richard said. "I thought I understood struggle because I'd worked hard to build my company." But watching you, raising a child alone, fighting for what's right despite the cost, that's a different kind of hard work. The kind that matters most. I just did what any parent would do. No, Lenora said gently. You did what every parent should do, but many don't. You put your values into action, even when it was terrifying. That's remarkable. After dinner, they walked to the nearby park, Sophie running ahead to the playground. The evening was cool but pleasant, the kind of weather that promised change, but not harshly. I have news, Lenora said as they watched Sophie swing. I'm officially stepping into a role at my father's company. Not because he wants me to, but because I want to. On my terms. That's wonderful, Terence said, meaning it. What changed? You did. You showed me that authenticity doesn't mean rejecting everything from your past. It means integrating it honestly. I can be Richard Whitmore's daughter and still be myself. Use the resources I have to make real change, like the single-parent initiative. Exactly. I spent so long running from my privilege that I forgot privilege isn't inherently bad. It's what you do with it that matters, she smiled. You taught me that. I think we taught each other a lot. Richard had joined Sophie on the swings, his expensive suit looking absurd, but his laughter genuine. Watching them, Terence felt a fullness in his chest that had nothing to do with material wealth and everything to do with connection. Thank you, he said quietly to Lenora, for seeing me, for standing with me. Thank you for letting me, for showing me what real courage looks like. She paused. Terence, I know we've been taking things slow, building this friendship first. But I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. Whatever this becomes, however long it takes, I'm here. He took her hand, the gesture simple but meaningful. I'm here too. Sophie called them over to push her on the swing and they went, laughing. Later, walking back to his car, Sophie reached up to hold both their hands, swinging between them. Are you happy, Daddy? She asked suddenly. The question stopped him. Was he happy? 6 months ago he'd lost his job, faced harassment, nearly lost his daughter. But he'd also gained friends who'd become family, learned his own strength, taught his daughter the most important lesson of all, that standing up for what's right matters more than staying comfortable. Yes, sweetheart, I'm happy. Good, because you deserve to be happy. You're a hero, not a hero. Just a dad who loves his daughter. Same thing, Sophie said with the absolute certainty of childhood. That night, tucking Sophie into bed, Terence smoothed her hair back and looked at this amazing person he'd had the privilege of raising. Do you know what I'm most proud of? He asked. What? That when you saw something wrong, you told me. You said someone should help that lady. You reminded me what mattered. In a way, sweetheart, you're the one who started all this. Sophie considered this seriously. So we're both heroes. We're both people trying to do the right thing. That's better than being heroes. She fell asleep quickly, clutching the stuffed rabbit that had seen her through so many changes. Terence stood in her doorway for a long moment, grateful beyond words for this life, these people, these second chances. His phone buzzed. A text from Lenora with a photo, the three of them at the park laughing, caught in a moment of pure joy. Underneath, family isn't just blood. Sometimes it's the people who show up when you need them most. Terence saved the photo, adding it to his growing collection of their new life. Then he went to his living room, pulled out Sophie's heart-shaped leaf from his pocket and pressed it carefully into the pages of a book. Some moments deserved to be preserved. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. Because they represented the truth he'd learned through fire. That's standing up for others, accepting help, building connections beyond yourself. Those were the things that made life worth living. The story that had started in a diner with a simple act of decency had transformed into something larger. Not a fairy tale with a perfect ending, but something better, a real life, messily beautiful, filled with people who'd chosen to be there. And that, Terence thought as he turned off the lights and headed to bed, was more than enough. It was everything.